Welcome back to the Property Management Show. I'm your host, Marie Tepman from Four and a Half Marketing Agency. Since 2012, we have dedicated ourselves to helping property managers like you grow your businesses by getting more owner leads through marketing. Whether you need help with a website, SEO, content marketing, online reputation management, social media, paid ads like Google Ads, you name it, we can help you. Visit our website fourandhalf.com to learn more. That's fourandhalf.com. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing the legendary Deb Newell from Real Time Consulting Services. Welcome to the show, Deb. Glad to have you back.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Of course, always love to chat with you. And so,
Yes.
before we tried to schedule our recording, I kind of did a little bit digging, found out that, you actually got started in the industry through your hobby of renovating investment properties. And then, you had a very dedicated career and now you're a consultant. To those people who are listening who may not be as familiar with your very decorated background, do you want to give a quick overview of everything you've kind of done until this point?
Sure, that sounds like fun. Okay, so started in probably like 1998, started renovating homes on my just kind of as a hobby, really. And that kind of grew into buying rental properties. Really, it was just a matter of wanting to get out of debt. And that was kind of the quick thing for me to do it. So, partnered with somebody, bought a rental property, did all the work, where I also learned how to do all the maintenance. I made a lot of mistakes. And once we sold that property, then bought another property, it just kind of honestly escalated from there. I just kept buying more and more and holding on to them after a while, realizing that it was kind of fun to hold on to and look at the recurring income. Honestly, I did not think further than probably my note and what I was getting myself into. So it was, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes and didn't even realize there was resources out there and on who I could lean. I feel like today there's just with Facebook and everything, there's just so much more that had I known, I probably would have been a lot smarter. But I think I treasure those mistakes in a weird way because I feel like they gave me a really great foundation to be who I am in this, with what I do, how bold I was with both residents and when I started doing third party, then, really setting boundaries because I had done it myself. I knew how much work was involved. So that was one thing I just kind of figured out from the very beginning is that I knew right away what my boundaries were and weren't. There's still, still a few owners that we took on that we probably shouldn't have, and, learn from those as well. And it kind of just grew from there. Then I did that for almost 21 years. And through other personal circumstances, I decided to sell my company, but I had started the consulting company back in 2013, mostly because I started getting asked a lot to kind of help with other companies. And it just, again, grew organically. Went back to school, got my MBA. Now I'm in a PhD program. So I'm kind of expanding on what I'm doing to really help others.
Yeah, which is really amazing, right? Like started as like, I just want to get out of debt. And then I kind of think it's fun. And then who would have thunk that, fast forward to 2023, you are one of the top consultants in property management.
I literally thought I would do something else with my whole life, not this. So I had different aspirations, let's put it that way. But, I think things happen for a reason. We're here for, what we're doing for, we've kind of created our own path in life. And this is what I have, chosen to do. And it's been good to me. And I hope I'm good to it back.
Yeah. And I'm sure it wasn't all, rainbows and unicorns because you started investing in properties in 1998. Obviously, you've been doing, things related to property management since then. and you lived through the Great Recession of '07 to '09.
hmm
Can you, to those listeners who may be curious what that was like for you in your market, do you mind sharing some stories around that?
Yeah. So I was in the Minneapolis market. I no longer live in Minneapolis, but that's where I was during that time. Um, Here's how I looked at it. We're in this position. We're in a really great position, actually. It was a win-win then, and it's always kind of a win-win for property managers. It's just really how you create that narrative. But uh, you know, it's a good time to actually consider investing when the market is kind of in a spiral, because we do know at some point bounce back to at some level. Might not be the exact level it was before, but people need a place to live. So owners either are equipped or don't know how to manage themselves and do a poor job of it. Now we're even in a better position because with all of the regulations that have really transpired in the last 10 years, that's to our benefit. As painful as it is, and trust me, it's very painful, especially if you're in Oregon or in Washington and northern, in California. And it's hard because there's a lot of regulation going on, but that's to our benefit because we're the experts. And so we can spin that narrative and really capture the business and, charge what we're worth, do what we are good at, and take that pain point away from owners, which, we don't want them making mistakes. They could really lose their shorts on, bad decisions. And so we want to make sure that we're doing those, we're helping them and kind of making sure that those things are met, and that, if it's rental licensing, if it's, you can and cannot do this, that we understand what those things are.
Yeah, and there are a lot of regulations that are being
hmm
proposed everywhere across the US. And I keep talking
Correct.
to property management professionals who are trying to fight the good fight, right? To try to, bring
Yeah.
light, like a multifaceted view, not just like the renter's point of view, into like how
Yeah.
these policies will impact the industry as a whole. Like, what would you say to property managers who are kind of just on the sidelines and who kind of feel like, well, we will just deal with it? Like, do you feel like there are things they can do in their businesses to be, better at or help influence this kind of regulation coming down?
I think, well, I think you need to know what's coming down. So I think you always have to be aware. I've always been very legislative minded. I believe that that's, understanding what's going on legislatively is critical to our business. It does paint us as the expert again, and it paints us into a position that allows us to kind of sometimes control that narrative, even with city officials. Oftentimes, when these regulations get passed, you're dealing with inspectors who don't always know the what has changed. And so when we can be that partner instead of an adversary, we want to make sure that we're in a good light. And so um, being kind of that key conductor and all of that is going to be really critical. So I guess to kind of go back to your question, it's make sure you understand what's going on. I think most people do now know that that's kind of, the rule. It's interesting. I talk to a lot of companies every day, and I get a lot of inquiries, and some people are just starting into the business. They're brand new. They want to start a property management company. But there are now more regulations even before when I kind of started, like, licensing, how long you have to be licensee, and all of these things that many of them don't know or take in consideration. So if they've never been in the industry and they're thinking this is what they want to do, I'm like, check first if you can do it. Do you need a license? Do you have somebody that can have, hold that license for you? What barriers are going to be in your way that prevent you from just kind of starting up? There's only a few key states that don't require licensing. Other than that, you need to have a real estate license. So what will that entail? How long will it take? There's some workarounds. There's people who do this as a business. They'll be a big for you, a broker in charge. So there's ways around it. But if you've never done this business, there's so many different facets to property management than there is to other types of businesses that I always just caution them to say it's a lot more. If you think this is going to be a passive business for you, that's not what I would suggest. I always suggest getting super involved so you understand everything from start to finish, from the entire life cycle, from the beginning to the end. And then when you're at that point where you want to step out a little bit more, you have the right person in place.
So to go back to like your experience living through the previous recession as an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
at what point did you feel like something weird was going on? And did you have to change your business or make certain difficult decisions to kind of weather through that?
I wish I had a really good story to tell you on that. I don't know if I remember specifically what I had to shift. Um, Thankfully, I don't think I had a big enough business. Uh, Probably only had a couple of hundred doors at the time, so it probably didn't. I don't think I felt the impact as much as I did, or I could have if I had maybe more doors. It's interesting because I literally just binge watched like all day or probably most of the day yesterday, that Bernie Madoff documentary that's on Netflix, and it's a completely different point of view on kind of what was happening during that time. Uh, but can say that we'll probably, hopefully, I shouldn't say never, but go down that same path again. Definitely won't be the same. But are there things that could still happen that, you know, we had a pandemic? So yes. So other external factors can still impact our business. In fact, doing that kind of a relatable thing, I think the pandemic was harder on companies than the first recession, to be honest. I think people went into foreclosure, and that was probably what was detrimental. Thankfully, I don't think I had a lot that happened to me, maybe a small handful that I can recall, but it wasn't anything that caused me to really worry. I think if we position ourselves and have, again, really good contracts in place, those things don't happen. The pandemic was such an unknown because it's almost like a movie. You don't realize that things could just completely shut down. That didn't happen there, but it did happen, just in the last few years. So I think that had a more dramatic impact on our business, and actually is causing a lot of other people to go, is this an industry I want to go into? Because we still recovered as we do, because again, it's kind of a win-win. We still need a place to live. But if you can weather the rent not being paid, you know what I mean? The rent assistance
Moratoriums.
the moratoriums, the rent assistance, like waiting on all of that to come. If you can weather through all of that and your owners can, then I think you have a good solid business with that you can get through that.
You talk to a lot of established and even upcoming property management business owners. And given that anything could literally happen, what is your best advice on how to position yourself to not be so vulnerable if something else shifts, if something crazy like COVID-19 happens again?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is don't not be involved at all. So there's a lot of people I talk to who are like, I just want to get out of the day-to-day of the weeds. I get that. And that's important. And you probably shouldn't be in the day-to-day weeds, especially depending on your company size. But I think you should not be involved, or at least understand the company's metrics and where you're at all times. I see a lot of people who don't even know where they're at on their profitability necessarily, what their customer acquisition cost is, what their profit margins are. Like, they have probably a little bit of an understanding. They might know the number, but they don't know how it's going to impact them. They don't know whether or not, how many people they should be hiring, who has direct labor in their company, and things like that. So I think the KPIs and metrics, which has kind of been a buzz for so long, but I think the way that you look at your business and who you have operating the business and part of the team is really important. The culture is going to be important. Not being completely hands off is going to be important. So making sure that your company's still meeting their metrics I say week, month, every day, week, and month. You should have some, key metrics that are in place and what those are, and making sure that you're kind of, you have your pulse on it still. That to me is probably the biggest thing. I think a lot of people want to be involved but not be involved, but then they don't have the right people in place, and then they kind of give their I'm always amazed how many people give their company over to their employees because they're afraid of the conflict that could happen. They're like, I don't want to like put any more on them because they'll quit. There was, everybody was worried that people would quit, and while that can be a concern, I think the biggest concern is if they don't quit, what's gonna be more damaging? If they stay and you just let them kind of create the atmosphere and whatever it is they're doing, I mean, that to me is actually more damning. So really having a handle on the organization, the roles, the functions, the KPIs and metrics. If you have that foundationally, everything else will run pretty smoothly. But most companies I work with don't have that. They have a version of it. So when I start working with them, I help them kind of develop that foundation, right? So what does the organization need to look like? If we could start all over and you knew what you knew today, what would that company look like with roles and those job descriptions, those KPIs within those job descriptions, exactly what function are they going to be doing, and really getting them set in that right mindset and thinking so that they can then build from there. Now, do I have the right people? Like, you can't create a job for a person. The person needs to fit into the role that you've created for the company. Oftentimes we just don't want to rock the boat, and so we don't. And so we kind of let it go. And what happens is you no longer have, it's like you own the company, but you don't have any ownership into it. You have no say of what decisions get made or not. And it's a lot of it's not done maliciously. It's just, it happens. And so you kind of lose sight of what your goals are.
Yeah. So kind of like becoming an owner on paper, but you don't really have the impact as an owner, in real life. And what really struck me when you were talking about like, some people who say like, oh, we have these things, but they typically have a version of it, but it's not like completely fleshed out. I that reminded me of an interaction I had at NARPM National in 2022. So during the time Daniel Craig was presenting the industry benchmarks, right? Like everyone should be there. But just for security, in case there were people who wanted to go to the booth, like I stayed behind with one other colleague, and someone came up to the booth and we were just curious, like, hey, why aren't you on the main hall listening to the benchmark study, And we were just really curious. And we thought he was going to say, oh, I work with them, or like, I already know all my KPIs, I'm good. Instead, he said, oh, I don't care about those benchmarks, those numbers, the data. I just want to know that my business is profitable. And my colleague and I looked at each other like, literally what they're talking about. Like everything they're talking about there boils down to how well your business is running. And I think you're right. There is a disconnect between like the thing that you need to do and the interpretation people have of how to actually do it in their business and the impact.
I think it's a little scary sometimes to know those numbers, because I think what happens is people don't know what they need to know. It's almost like, I always say work backwards. Figure out what you want and then work backwards to get that. So if you're saying percent margin on all maintenance, or I want a 20% margin overall in the company, or I want more, you have to figure out what you need to do to make that happen. And that actually gives you kind of this benchmark to really build out the rest. It helps discipline you on what you as far as your income and expenses go. It helped discipline you on who you should, have on the team, what roles they should be doing. Oftentimes I'll meet with companies and I'll interview. Part of my process is I'm interviewing the team just to kind of get their take on their position, their, what's working, what's not working. And I'm also kind of doing an assessment on the team person, the team member, and I'm realizing they might not be a great fit for that position. They may be a better fit in another position, or they might not be a good fit culturally at all for the company. But oftentimes people are given these fancy titles that really don't even match at all what they do. They're the director of something, and I'm like, you're just an assistant or a property manager. Like, what you're doing doesn't really equal up to, and honestly, if you're a director or you're a VP or you're an office manager, you should be running off of reports. You should be having your team meet all of these expectations with every day, every week, every month. And that's not how the business is run. And so they don't really know. And I often say growth will happen. People are so focused on growing the business still, and the growth will happen if you fix the internal operations piece. If you have a good team in place, if they know exactly what they have to do, if they know when, where, how, what they're touching throughout the entire process, how the handoff happens, if they can all answer it and it's all the same, then you'll grow.
That's great. And so, any final thoughts on where the property management industry is going in the next couple of years? There's so many things happening, right? Like there's talk of recession, and there is also market consolidation. Like, all the big companies are trying to buy up the smaller ones, and there are smaller companies that are like, I will never sell. What's your take on all of that?
It's interesting because obviously I sold. So that's, but I sold for I had a specific reason I needed for why I sold. It was personal and I needed to do it. And I also, I had some life changes that happened, and that was what was my, that was my why. But I think, so everybody has a different reason, and you have to kind of look at it and go, what is my exit plan for this, my succession plan? So you do have to, at some point in your career, think about what that is. But with that said, I still think there's a need for small companies. I mean, these big companies that are coming in and acquiring the smaller ones, at some point they'll consolidate as well. And what does that look like? Owners don't always want that. They're not always driven by price. They do want customer service. They want some of the things that maybe the larger companies can't pivot and do as quickly as a smaller company can. So I think we're always going to be in this industry that is needed, small or large. That's, you can't commercialize it, and you can't make it all AI. It won't work. There's certain things that we can do with AI, and automation is key. But in the end, people still want to see a face. They still want to have communication. Owners, we're still giving us their asset, investment or asset, whatever it is, to them. They still want it taken care of. And that's kind of our role in all of that.
Yeah, that's super interesting, right? With this explosion of AI, and you can literally spend the whole day thinking about, like, how can I outsource every single facet of my business to AI?
Sure.
But at the end of the day, like, people are going to entrust you with their biggest asset, right? And maybe there are people who never want to deal with a person, but not everyone is going to be like that. I know there's a Japanese restaurant here in San Francisco Bay Area that you just deal with an iPad. You, like, get seated, and then there's an iPad, and, like, everything is through the iPad. You order, you track your order, and, it's novel, it's fun, but I'm not going to eat there all the time, because sometimes I want to have a server who, like, chats me up, and, it just feels more, it's just different. It's different. So with any business, I feel like.
And I think that's a novelty experience, right? So I think, to your point, that's a great idea, and it probably works famously, but it's a one-time experience. These are transactional occurrences, not recurring things. When you have a recurring transaction that's happening all the time, like it's monthly, every month I'm managing your property, every month I'm charging you a management fee, those are recurring, transactions that are happening. But if it's a one-time transactional ancillary thing, sure, maybe, an automation can set that up and be in place for that. But ultimately, we need to have a better control over how we manage properties and how we manage the asset in general and become more of an asset manager to our owners and to our clients because, they may be in a position to buy more properties and we don't know that until we, have an account review, fill them out. It's like kind of going back to the basics a little bit when you have a financial advisor, kind of going back to what is it you're looking for? What is your end goal? What are you hoping to achieve? The company needs to be able to, one, do that, but also be able to provide that. So internally, what do I need to do to be able to offer that kind of a service?
It's interesting that you mentioned financial advisors because fintech has been around for a long time. And
Right.
you would think that by now there wouldn't be personal financial advisors, but they're still booming. Why? Because, yes, AI tools are helpful. I myself have played around with those tools to, project retirement and they give you, statistics and like what's the likelihood that you would retire with this much money, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I still want a person to be like, hey, are there, other things that I'm overlooking? You are a person, you've spoken with many families who have gone through this journey. Like, what can you tell me given the data, what the data is saying? Because at the end of the day, the algorithms are going to give you like what's the most likely. But then it's like, if the data can't tell you everything. So I really love, your comparison with like fintech and like kind of like what's happening in property management.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah, and so I really appreciate you taking time
Thanks,
out of your
Marie.
busy day. Always a
Of
pleasure to
course.
chat. Thank you so much. And where can our listeners find you if they want to ask you more questions or if they need some help in their
Sure.
business?
It's easy. My website's propertymanagementconsulting.com. So it's very easy. And they can go there and they can schedule a meeting with me if they want to talk more. It's all there on my website. And that's probably the best way. Really just, I like to offer, the first time I'm talking with somebody, there's no cost. It's just kind of high level. What are the pain points? What are you experiencing? Uh, we have a good team. We're doing everything from helping clients do valuations and acquisitions and selling all the way through, the, creating that foundation. We work with single family, multifamily. It's kind of, we're all over the board, but I think this opportunity and working with so many different types of companies and mixed in, companies is that it really helps give me data on what is working and what's not, and to kind of help present that for other clients as well.
And that's a wrap on another episode of the Property Management Show, brought to you by 4.5 Marketing Agency. Since 2012, we have dedicated ourselves to helping property managers get more owner leads through marketing. Whether you need help with a website, SEO, social media, online reputation, content marketing, Google ads, Bing ads, you name it, we can help you. Visit 4andhalf.com to learn how to ramp up your growth this year. That's FOURANDHALF.com. And if you are enjoying our show, please go ahead and leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. And go ahead, share it with your friends so they can benefit from it too. Feel free to send over questions, suggestions, comments to marketing@4andhalf.com as well. Stay tuned for more on the Property Management Show. See you next time.